Hi, I'm Ronnie Santmeyer, and today I'm going to open a can of worms about converter mixing. Somebody on Facebook the other day, I think it was the UAD forum, asked about, or UAD Facebook asked about, has anyone taken a Rosetta 800 and put it with an Apollo 8? And I chimed in, said I put a Rosetta 200 with an Apollo 16 for extra inputs, and you have to be careful of latency and phasing. And that opened up a whole can of worms, and people just started attacking me about stuff, which I thought was funny. I don't know how many of them knew what they were talking about, but I wasn't talking about latency as far as setting your buffer size in your computer and the distance it takes to get in and out in that sense. I was talking about the latency with inside the unit itself. Going in analog to any converter, having it process its digital, through the ADD converter, and then come back out. Whether it's coming out analog would probably take a little longer, but when it comes out digital, there's still some timing on that front end, and each converter can be different. I kind of gave some examples, and still guys didn't get it, and guys were just going off. It was funny. A couple of the people followed me and understood, but other guys are going off. So I did a test the other night, which is when I discovered this, but then I did another test with a friend of mine, and I'll show you these examples. He was over doing some vocals on a song. But before we did it, I said, hey, grab my guitar and just, strum something and sing. It wasn't even the song that he was going to be working on, but I'm like, just sing and play a little something. And let me record you. I kind of malted it in my patch bay. So I had, came out of a mic pre into a malt and then split it. One side goes into Apollo and the other side goes into the Rosetta. So I'm recording at the same time, and I can show you what happens. And I don't know if I'll do that test in a minute. If you go into two different inputs, I did this actually with my Fractal, just goofing around. I had my guitar plugged in. I was just kind of messing around before a session. And I took the output, one into a mic pre, like I did here, and was just testing the Fractal with a bunch of different mic pre's for fun. But I ended up going into the Apollo, and then I went on two inputs on the Apollo. And I turned them both on. Of course, it doubles the volume, or double inputs, so you're doubling the volume. Then I took one side and put it into Rosetta. I just wanted to hear the difference in converters. They're much older converters, but they still have a tone. They're cool. They got a little more girth in bottom and a little rounded off on the top compared to the Apollo, which is more detailed. And I was just curious about that. But as soon as you play those two together, of course, the phasing and difference in the way one's treated and meant to sound kind of colored, the other one's supposed to be clean, and they definitely have their own little timings. As soon as you turn them both on together, there's some comb filtering. Now, most people wouldn't be bothered by that. If I'm tracking, say, a band, and I put most of the band through my Apollo 16, but I might want to put a guitar or, say, a scratch vocal through the Rosetta, there's no issue. It's not going to be a problem. I was talking to a friend of mine about this because he does drums, and he has a Rosetta 800. You probably won't hear if everything's going to the Rosetta 800, individually mic'd. But if you're sharing other converters at the same time, nobody's going to obviously take a kick drum input or inside kick drum mic and go to two different converters at the same time. So you would hear. But knowing that there's that comb filtering going when you take a brand of mic pre, or I keep saying mic pre, but converter, if you take a brand of converters, Apogee, I tried this Audient over there, and in this test I'll let you hear, and the Apollo, they're kind of not timed together. They're going to phase around. So of course, I'm not putting a single instrument on them generally, but the fact that knowing that they're comb filtering, when you're playing drums in a room, it's swirling around. Those mics everywhere are grabbing that swirled kind of comb filtering sound. And that's something you can go, oh yeah, I don't really hear it, so it doesn't bother me. But when you're EQing the drums, whether it's the room mics or the overheads, you are EQing that comb filtering, which is working against you. Maybe if you had all the same converters, of course, you wouldn't have that comb filtering. Your choices of EQ would be completely different. So you can go out and try different microphones and different mic pre's and find sounds you like, but you almost have to take into account when you're doing a multi-mic thing like drums, or where all of them are pointing in the same room together, and the signals are going to multiple mic pre's, and then it's divided. Half of them are going to one brand of converter and the other half are going to another converter. That all captured in the same room, it's going to swirl around and be part of your sound. You're going to hear that comb filtering everything. If you had a bunch of instruments in one room with one set of converters, and at the same time other members were in another room on different converters, that's completely fine. Has no issue. That's what no one, I don't think, on that little attack on Facebook were understanding. I wasn't saying you can't use different brands of converters at the same time. I was just pointing out when you use them on the same source. And then I gave an example of a bass DI and a bass cabinet. And then someone's like, well, they're always going to have latency. Of course. It takes longer to go through the amp, come out of the amplifier into the microphone to meet the DI. On a normal world, even in the analog world, you had to flip phase. I get that. I was just trying to use an example of when you would possibly maybe use two sources at once. A DI guitar I use for an example. I wouldn't go to two converters for that either. It was just my point, knowing that that happens. So when you do mic multi, in drums are obvious, because that's when you're probably miking the most amount of, having most amount of microphones set up at one time in your studio. Instead of talking about it, here, so Bronson, my buddy Bronson Wagner just did a little bit of a song with the acoustic, just sitting on a stool with my mic set up. So it wasn't, you know, a real keeper vocal. I plugged them, they're different mic pre's. We were testing different mic pre's. This is the Cappy VP28. So here he is in the room.
But I love the sound when you talk, 'cause I'm going down.
Okay, that's into the Apollo. And then here's the same thing, same time into the Rosetta.
But I love the sound.
Let me go to right here.
'Cause I'm going down. 'Cause I'm going down.
As you can hear, there's a little more top end on the Apollo.
'Cause I'm going down.
Here's the Rosetta.
'Cause I'm going down.
Now when I play them together,
'Cause I'm going down.
it's not getting just doubled in volume like it would if you would go into two Apollos, which I didn't do that here. I'll do that in a minute.
'Cause I'm,
But you hear that comb filtering.
'cause I'm,
Now let's go to a different mic pre. Let's go over to, here's a Great River.
I'm going down.
And here it is, the Rosetta.
I'm going down. Without you here.
Together.
I'm going.
So it's always going to have that phase. So again, you know, here's a Chandler LTD1.
Without you here, I need you now.
So if you had a bunch of microphones set up and they were going to different converters, like that tone you hear, that comb filtering kind of weird sound is going to be in all your mics that you're fighting. They're not going to be pointed at the same source, so it may not be this drastic. This is pointed at the same source, same guitar, same vocal, so it's going to have a more drastic sound than mics pointed at drums and some mics pointed at rooms. But it is still happening. That the microphone traveling in, swirling around is still happening instead of going all to the same. That's why some producer engineers really like to track drums on an entire console, all the same mic pre's, because everything's the same timing, same, you know, fast speed of in and out. Even though it's analog, it still has a speed. You go into a really fast, clean, transient mic pre and then go into a Neve, you'll feel that sluggishness that a Neve has, which is cool. But producers a lot like to go through all the same mic pre's. That helps with phasing and everything when everything's kind of the same. And then take that to the digital side, going in the converter, same thing. If you go into all the same type of converters, that's just going to sound more tight, more together. So we did the vocals. Let's check this out now. This is me just strumming through the Fractal, going through a mic pre. I think I went through a Great River pre on this, but. Okay, here's the Rosetta. Or no, I'm sorry. This test is the Audient up there. I was just going to, I just wanted to test going into a line in on this and just coming digital out just to see, because after I did the Rosetta timing, I was like, let me try another converter, and that's the only other little 2-channel converter I had laying around. So that's that compared to the Apollo. I will say that the converters are volume-wise pretty on top of each other as far as the Apogee and the Apollo go. The Audient is a little lower in volume. So the Apollo again is a little clearer. It's just a newer converter, obviously. But watch when I play them together. That's not the Apogee, so it's having the same effect. The Audient has a little bit different timing going in and out than the Apollo, so. But again, if the Apollo was on one source and the Audient was on a different source, wouldn't be a problem. But if you ever needed to share them because you were trying to get extra channels, you know you have an 8-channel unit and you hook up additional 8 channels through ADAC connections on the back of a Focusrite or whatever to do more mics on a drum kit, you got to take into account, unless it's another Focusrite product with the same kind of converters, but if it was another brand, you could have this issue. All right, and now I'm going to do real quick is I'll do a live thing. The show, the Fractal is actually plugged into the STAM audio unit, and let me see, this I can do here. So if you notice, I'm going into the analog 16 I did just so I'm close to this AES. So here's the same thing, there's the Rosetta going digital in. Little rounder, but now watch when I play them together. See how they kind of filter funny? Again, if that was multi-microphones, you'd be hearing that. So let's listen to one source real quick. Sorry about the guitar being kind of out of tune. My strings are dead and I should have changed them, but. So here, we'll play this back. Okay, it's got that filtered sound. All right, so now let me do this. I'm just going to duplicate this channel here. Can that? We'll go over here a minute. Just for this test. So now I'm going to take the Rosetta's input that I was using and I'm just going to put it into the Apollo on 15 now. So here's where we were. And then here. Same thing. Put them together. Hear that? No comb filtery sound, just double the volume. All right, let me record a little of this. They can play together at the same time. The other Apollo, and together. That was basically my whole point of that whole argument on Facebook, is that going into the same converters, the same type, whether you bought another Apollo or whatever brand you started with, if you had Rosetta and you 800 and you got another Rosetta 800 and you were stacking multiple things, it's fine. And again, having different converters for different tones is cool. So if you were tracking, guitars through the Rosetta, but you like drums through the Apollo and you like a vocal through another converter, that's fine. It's all different things happening for different colors, just like kind of mic pre's. But what's not cool, unlike combining different mic pre's at the same time on a drum kit, but when it comes to stuff like timing and latency, and that's the other thing somebody brought up. Well, you're not clocking right and yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? Of course I'm clocking right. I know how to do this. But the Audient, for instance, won't even pass signal unless you have it clocked correctly. I think the Apogee is the same way. If it's not clocked, it's not passing signal. So clocks have nothing to do with that. Clocks are good when you have multiple digital devices. You all want them to meet at the same place. And if they do hiccup, they hiccup together, not like, you know, at different times. Again, it has nothing to do with the internal workings of once it goes in analog, it's got to convert. It's just like even in the analog world, when you had an analog console and you were still incorporating some digital devices like an Eventide, to go into an Eventide analog through your aux send, it still processes a little bit inside. It's fast, but it processes a little bit and spits back out. When we talk latency for DAWs, we're talking, you know, milliseconds a lot of times. When I'm talking latency inside these converters, they're talking samples. 1 or 2 samples off and maybe 3 samples from one device to the next is what's going to cause that filtery sound. You know, having all the same converters like the Apollos, like I said, they're on the same exact, you know, timing as far as the samples internally. Then of course they're linked together, so the latency on the overall general computer setup, they're right. It's 2 different things people are getting confused about. Anyway, I babbled enough. I just wanted to show that quick example. Be aware, if you put 2 converter brands together, they can be used, but be careful. And if you are going to use one, just check. Take a single source and just go to 2 different converters at the same time and listen to it. If you hear that comb filtering, you can do whatever you want to do. I personally wouldn't use them all on a single source, knowing that I'm going to EQ and have that crap going on. But maybe I'm a perfectionist and I'm just nerdy about that kind of stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching this, and I hope it doesn't start another can of worms being opened up. Thanks. Bye.